The Unwanted, Chapter 50. The departure area was deserted, except for a few civilians and policemen. Evidence of a busy morning registered on everybody's face in the scattered piles of garbage littering the floor. The only furniture was a row of aluminum desks in the center of the room. Behind each desk stood a policeman. My family was nowhere in sight. Neither were the 300 other passengers. In fact, I seemed to be the only Amerasian in the room. A female guard approached me. The curious look on her face dissipated the moment I presented to her my passport. "Where have you been?" she snapped and ushered me to the first desk. There, I was searched quickly for hidden weapons. At the second table, I got my passport stamped. Next, I had to sign a release form. In the paper they offered to me, I immediately recognized my family's signatures scribbled beside their printed names. Relieved, I scanned the room. Closed doors led to mysterious and unidentified areas. However, somewhere in that building, my family was waiting for me. I took a deep breath and stepped to the last table, praying silently for a miracle. The policeman looked up. "Where are your documents?" he asked. I stared at him, petrified. "In my knapsack, sir." "Take them out." I fumbled in my bag and pulled out the thick stack of papers. Years of hard work had culminated in a 2-foot heap of paperwork. Cautiously, I slid the unsigned real estate form into the middle of the pile before I handed everything to him. I tried to maintain a poker face, but inside I felt about to faint. The policeman seized the pile of papers. In one swift movement, he tossed everything in the air without glancing at it. Sheets of paper flew into the open space, flapping around me like white butterflies before they landed on the floor. I uttered a small cry. My pictures, my family's pictures, and every other document that I had worked so hard to prepare in the last 3 years all lay on the ground, facing upward among other anonymous, forgotten families. "You're all done," the policeman said. "Go in there and join your family." He pointed toward a small doorway at the end of the room. "What is the point of making us get all these documents together if they are insignificant to you?" I protested, unable to believe what had just happened. He shrugged, pushing me toward the exit. "Get out of here and stop wasting my time. Nobody wants to keep trash like you in this country." I grabbed my knapsack and straightened my clothes. His cruel words could no longer hurt my feelings. In fact, my anger gave me new strength to move forward. From the entrance, a voice called my name. I turned around and time seemed to stop. Kim stood between the two guards, wearing the same sleeveless red blouse that had made me tremble the first day we met. Her jet black hair was shiny like the midnight sky, and her teeth were perfect like porcelain. I dropped my knapsack on the floor, feeling my knees weaken as emotion rushed through me like the crash of waves against the sandy beach. She ran to me. One of the guards seized her arm, pulling her away through the room. Struggling free, she turned to face me. Her hand reached out in my direction, waving. I ran after them and yelled, "Please stop. Let me say goodbye to her." They let her go. We ran toward each other. I squeezed her with all my strength. "I am so sorry," I stammered. "I am sorry for hurting you. I shouldn't have done what I did. Please forgive me." She looked up at me. "It's quite all right, Kian. I am glad that my first time was with you. I didn't mean that. It was my first time as well. What I want to say is I'm sorry for treating you badly because of who you are. My intention was not pure when I befriended you." "Do not think too much about that, Kian," she smiled, tapping her temple with her forefinger. "I have only beautiful memories of you right here." I breathed a sigh of relief. "Thank you. I am glad that you do. By the way, how did you get here? And who brought you?" She nestled her head on my chest. "I am here with your aunt," she said. "She is upstairs, waiting for your family on the balcony. You'll see us again when you walk out on the runway. My parents don't know yet that I am in Saigon. I came because I just cannot let you leave my life on that awful note. If there's nothing else between us, at least I want your friendship. I smothered her face with kisses. I have thought about us a great deal, I whispered in her ear. I will never forget you as long as I am still alive. Thank you, she said. A mischievous smile brightened her face. There is still hope for you after all, Kian. A guard nudged my back. Let's go, he urged, pushing the knapsack into my hand. We broke apart. I touched her face, trying to memorize her delicate neck, her unblemished skin, and the distinctive freckles on her cheeks. I'll write to you, I called. I'll tell you what happens to us every week, no, every day, until we meet again. She grabbed her shoulders as if she were cold. Her eyelashes were beaded with tears, but she smiled, watching me disappear behind a door. Goodbye, Kim, I said to her one last time. The room was packed with hundreds of children screaming and chasing each other between the rows of chairs like the inside of a giant classroom. Two of the walls, made out of glass, overlooked the landing strips. Outside on the cement, 3 airplanes were parked within 100 feet of each other, reflecting the sunlight. I searched for my family. On the floor near the exit, they huddled together, preparing lunch. Jimmy jumped up and down, waving his hands to get my attention. I waved back, pushing past a group of children. The adults stared at me, yet no one made any attempt to let me get across. Sitting alone on a bench at my right was a blonde girl I had met at the interview site. Her overweight mother and 14 pretentious siblings were nowhere in sight. One of her hands clutched a basket. The other held a heavy sack that was slung over her shoulders. Her eyes were red and swollen from crying. Hey, I said to the girl, are you okay? She nodded, avoiding my stare. I saw you at the interview a few months ago. Where's your family? Those people are not my real family, she replied. My mother sold me to that lady last year so I could take her entire family to America. But when we came in for the interview, the Americans figured out the scam. They issued only 1 ticket for me after turning everybody else down. She began to sob bitterly. Don't cry, I consoled her. When you get to America, you can sponsor your real family. It only takes another year before you can see them again. I don't know where they are, she cried. My mother moved away soon after I was sold. I patted her thin shoulder. I'm sorry, I said, but don't worry. You are not alone. I read somewhere that once you get to America, a good family will adopt you. Would you like to come over and sit with my family and me? We will keep you company in the meantime. She nodded, wiping her tears and gathering her belongings. Together, we stepped over rows of people approaching my mother. Betty sat on the floor. Banana cake crumbs covered her hands. She winked at me and smiled. I made it here in one piece, Mother, I said over the loud noises. My mother put a hand over her chest. Her face was pale from anxiety. I was so worried, she said. I didn't know what I would have done if you had gotten stuck behind. I've been praying all morning. Her eyes shifted curiously to the girl who stood behind me. It's a long story, I explained. She will be needing our company for a while. My mother leaned back against the glass door. She looked tired. In that case, sit your friend down, she said. I saved you some lunch.